Hello to everybody. This is Cristina Mattiello again. And now we are going to see together Unit 3, which is divided into two parts, poverty and ethnic minorities. The second part includes a case study. In fact, this unit has more slides than the others. The case study is about a transnational European minority, the Romani people. Romani here is an adjective, or we could say just Roma as a substantive, a very marginalized and little known people. So I hope you'll find it interesting. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Here you find the index of Unit 3 divided into two parts, and then the index of the case study from slide 29 to slide 46. Slide 47, bibliography, is for the whole unit. And now we start with poverty. We can see two beautiful, I think, quotations. Poverty is the worst form of violence, Mahatma Gandhi. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity, it is an act of justice, Nelson Mandela. In both cases, we have a strong statement implied. Poverty is unjust. It is created by unfair social structures and has to be overcome. In slide 5, we can read about the first goal in Agenda 2030. We've already talked about it. No poverty. Unfortunately, the situation is very bad. Still, more than 700 million people live with less than $250 a day. This is extreme or absolutely poverty. And some experts even say that we should consider at least $7. Most of them are in the sub-Saharan Africa, and COVID-19 worsened the situation. Slide 6, how to define poverty. This is the official United Nations definition. The two most important elements are lack of income and productive resources, which could ensure sustainable livelihoods. Hunger and malnutrition are extreme expressions of extreme poverty. There are multiple disadvantages through unemployment, low income, poor housing, inadequate health care, barriers to lifelong learning, culture, sport, recreation. Poor people are often excluded and marginalized. So intersectionality is very strong with them. In slide 7, we can see a different term, which solidarity groups consider more correct. They say we shouldn't say poverty, but impoverishment. And therefore, not poor people, but impoverished people. Because poverty does not result either from a natural and given status or condition, or from personal inadequacy and inability. Poverty is caused by unjust social structures, exploitation, and lack of opportunity due to discrimination. That's why the Declaration of Human Rights in Article 22 states that poverty is a violation of a human right. Everyone, it says, as a member of society, has the right to social security. So let's try to remember this and let's try to teach our students that we should say impoverishment instead of poverty. Inequalities. How inequalities are related to poverty. Inequality in the last years have increased in an impressive way. 2023 has been a turning point because poverty for the first time increased after a long period. In the same year, the richest 1% of the global population got to have nearly twice as much new wealth as the rest of the world altogether. And the process is increasing. In 2025, billionaire wealth is supposed to grow 3 times faster than in 2024. Of course, inequality can be reduced only through structural economic changes. Here, I put the reference for a World Inequalities database, which is very interesting because it is in an interactive site. So I think you can see it and study the different data on it. In slide 9, we have some data about poverty in Europe, its distribution. And I'd like to stress here that women are the social group more at risk. First women and then young adults. In European Union, risk of poverty or social exclusion is for 93.3 million people, which is the 21% of total population, a huge number, I think, in Europe. In slide 10, we can see the elements which define a severe material and social deprivation. What needs are not satisfied in everyday life, in the domestic field, in social life, at an individual level. I like to note one thing. Some of these parameters, like an internet connection or leisure activities, or getting with family and friends for dinner once a month, may seem not essential, but they are essential. They are of crucial importance for being at ease in a personal and social life, for psychological health too. In slide 11, we'll talk about new poverty or new impoverishment, a very alarming social phenomenon. Many people who have a job earn such a little income that they cannot afford living without anxiety and material difficulties. They often have precarious jobs and they run a terrible risk. The process of pauperization, which is mostly urban and affects young people as well as families, can be extreme. And so sometimes this new poverty affected people or impoverished people run the risk to become homeless for unemployment, divorce, or other unexpected problems which traumatically change their life all of a sudden. And here, a slide about homeless. The global data are terrible. 3,030,000 people lack of any shelter. And this is a conservative extreme. We have to clear that homeless is not a choice. The romantic image of the homeless who is a wanderer who wants to live like that is just false. It is true that quite often homeless people reject institutional proposal of collective shelters, but this is just because they find them dangerous and uneasy. But all of them would really like to have a house or even a shelter to protect themselves. Intersectionality with mental disease is strong, of course, for these persons. Stigma is widespread and it is very, very hard to live. Homeless are seen as subhuman, as waste, and they are often victims of verbal and also physical violence. It is of crucial importance to help students overcoming prejudices against homeless people. Meeting with some of them, together with social operators and volunteers and solidarity groups, can be really very useful. And now new slaveries, slide 13. Slavery is not a historical phenomenon. It is a terrible crime, a violation of human rights, which we can still see today. Over 40 million people and 12 million children in the world can be considered new slaves, according to the International Labour Organization data. We are talking of extreme or absolute poverty on one hand, and of the exploitation of this condition on the other. These new slaves find themselves linked to their exploiters and have no way to free themselves because they lack of economic possibilities or because they are victims of violent coercion, or both things together. Here you can read some typologies of new slaveries: human trafficking, forced labor, all kinds of forced labor, including sexual exploitation. Debt bondage, which is very widespread in the poorest area of the world. And it causes debt again through generations. Forced marriage, which is domestic slavery, domestic servitude. Slide 14. Again, no real inclusion, no real integration of poor people can occur if they are not given the possibilities to have an adequate job and a shelter. And this implies some social, economic, structural changes. But today, assistance is mostly left to charity and solidarity. Extreme poverty and homeless condition are now spreading, also in Europe, where the continuous erosion of welfare makes the situation very alarming. Reintegration is something more than inclusion and integration. It means to help marginalized people to recover self-confidence and helping them to be able to build a new life in dignity. Here you find some possible actions to implement this process. A person-centered strategy is needed. Each case is different from the others. Restore self-confidence, formal and informal education and professional training, supporting job searching, community-based programs. Community is crucial because it is inclusive and in an informal way can develop friendships. Inclusive education to contrast stigmatization, contempt and violence. Meetings and activities between students and poor or homeless people. And if possible, even some assistance experiences. for example, in soup kitchen. This could be organized with the help of charity, lay, and religious associations. And now we have the minority ethnic groups, part 2. We find a quotation from a book by Jara Khan, a Afro-Italian writer, artist, activist, feminist, and anti-racist activist. An African woman in this novel who still lives in her village comes to see her family in Italy and realizes that her niece is losing her African cultural heritage and roots. So she will explain to the little girl the importance of staying connected with the African world they come from. Here she's talking about the ancestor's name, a secret name the little girl must know and recognize as her own. Double identity is a problem for all minority ethnic groups, but also a goal for them. Elizabeth cannot be your only name. What have you done to this child? Why didn't you give her a secret name, the ancestor's name? What is the ancestor's name, aunt? In slide 17, as usual, we begin with an official definition. Ethnic minorities are defined by shared culture, tradition, language, history. They maintain solidarity among the different elements of the group, share a sense of collective identity and social recognized rules. We also say that the term minority itself is criticized because it can seem to imply some inferiority. So we must be quite sure, and we have to say that we are using the term minority not to mean inferiority, but just as a number in proportion to the total population. It is also important to say that this term refers to a cultural identity and not to the color of the skin, because several minority groups are white. Human rights for ethnic minority groups. This is slide 18. In 1992, the United Nations General Assembly used a declaration on the rights of persons belonging to national or ethnic or religious and linguistic minorities. States shall protect their existence and identities and their languages too, with an appropriate legislation. That means also in a formal way. Ethnic minorities' rights include full participation in public and national life, as well as in the economic life. They also have the right, or should have the right, to use their own language in private and in public, freely and without interference or any form of discrimination. Slide 19, cultural rights and education. The same concept can be found in Article 4 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which focuses on education and cultural life. Minority groups should have the right to have their languages protected and education in their mother tongue. States must encourage knowledge of the history of ethnic minorities, of their traditions, language, and cultures. Slide 20, stigma and stereotypes. People belonging to ethnic minority groups are often victims of stigma and prejudices, and they are marginalized. Stigma can have psychological and even psychoanalytical dimensions. And it is really very difficult to help people in that case. Intersectionality with poverty is frequent. Slide 21. This is quite an important life. Slide 21. Islamophobia. Islamophobia is widespreading in Europe today. 1 in 2 Muslims suffers from it in daily life, and it is worse for veiled women who risk to be physically attacked, and they are often insulted. Mosques creation or activities are sometimes hindered or impeded. What are the stereotypes about Islam? Islam aims to an invasion. It is a threat to our values, and Muslims are just terrorists, all of them. These are the most common stereotypes against Muslim people. Islamophobia is widespread in Europe, and discrimination in job, in housing, obstacles and attacks, sometimes also physical, to mosques, are widespread everywhere in all the countries. We must always remember that no religion as such can be identified with terrorists. Islam is plural, is a plural religion, like all the others. Terrorists are a tiny minority, and very often it is a political problem more than a religious one. But also, if it is a religious problem, it is a problem of a minority. No religion, I repeat, no religion can be on the whole considered terrorist. The International Day to Combat Islamophobia tries to promote a global dialogue and mutual understanding. Diasporas. We have to explain this word to our students. Diasporas, etymology. The word comes from an ancient Greek word, dia, through, and another, speiro, scattering seeds. Spora means seed, in fact. Scattering through, spreading. This is its general meaning. Diaspora means both the process of migration and the communities in the country of arrival. Diasporas keep live cultural heritage, but also risk to be marginalized. These persons have to find a difficult balance, and we must help them in doing this. They risk to live in ghettos, socially ethnical, homogeneous places, because of their marginalization and the fear that being among others can be dangerous. They feel that the others are hostile towards themselves, and so try to stay together. But that's not good for an inclusive society. Slide 23. Ethnic minority groups are naturally plurilinguistic. We have to distinguish their mother tongue, the native language, their colonial language, the language left by the colonial country, the receiving country language, the majority language, which is the language to use for inclusion and integration, and also many creative variations and combinations. We must not try to impose only one language, the language of the majority group. That should be a serious violation of the rights of ethnic minorities. We have to know all these languages. We have to know that they exist. We have to respect them, and we have to help the communities to preserve them. And here I'd like to talk about the ethnic and linguistic minority status. Slide 24. An ethnic group can be officially, formally recognized as such. In this case, many rights are or should be guaranteed to it by law. Some of these groups, like Roma in Italy and Corsicans in France, for example, are not recognized. And that creates many legal, political, psychological, social problems. It obstacles self-confidence and produces a very bad circle of marginalization, lack of hope, marginalization. In Europe, there are 87 distinct ethnic groups, the 12% of the total population. Inclusion of ethnic minority groups. Of course, it must be aimed at developing their sense of a new belonging without losing their roots, their cultural heritage. As I've already said, a very difficult balance, but we have to help them to reach it. Education is crucial, both in contrasting prejudices in students of the majority group and in developing self-confidence in diasporas ones. Reduction of any support is the political trend today in most European countries. Slide 26. Integration of ethnic minority groups. Integration of ethnic minority groups implies a real participation to social and political life. To have this, a systemic equity must be guaranteed. Equality cannot be such as it applies to people who have different starting point and resources. Equality can only work if everyone starts from the same place, from the same point, and needs the same thing. Systemic equity is a dynamic process. It has to reinforce and replicate equitable ideas, power, resources, strategies, conditions, habits, and outcomes. And we can see a glossary list about inclusivity. I put the reference to its link. In slide 27, minority groups and economy. Not only the other continental areas in the world have to reduce inequalities, also Europe must do it. Losing talents and potentialities because of marginalization is not only morally condemnable, but also economically negative for all. This is very important to understand and to explain to you, to our students. Common stereotypes see minority groups as people who steal jobs, but it is not true. If they are correctly included in the economic circuits, they enrich the whole country, the whole community. Slide 28. Identity is a flow on the move. Ethnic minority groups, cultural and musical expressions are beautiful, creative, artistic products. Recollecting memories and blending them with a new experience is the basis for all of them, interpreted through the different sensibilities. Each teacher should look for literary and musical works of ethnic minorities in their own countries and help students to get to know them. It is very good for intercultural education to invite some of the authors in order to have a personal contact with the students and develop friendship. Music is a natural form of intercultural communication. In Italy, the Circolo Gianni Bosio researchers have collected and studied the stories and the music of migrant musicians in Rome to see how different traditions can blend together. And now we have the case study, the Romani people. Here I stressed a very important concept. No other people is as oppressed by an imagery built over centuries on false negative stereotypes as the Romani people. It is very important to understand this because in the case of Roma, stereotypes has really shaped history and reality and politics, and they are often interiorized by Roma themselves in such a strong way that it is very difficult to help them to overcome them. Again, terminology. Roma is a substantive, Romani an adjective. Nomad is a term we have not to use. It has a dispregiative connotation, can mean homeless, poor, wanderer, not includable, rebel, so on. And it does not correspond to reality either, as only the 2 or 3% move around. Circus performers do, for instance. The term gypsy is accepted by them, but in our perspective, our no Roma perspective, this term may have a romantic and at the end false connotation, or can be defiantly negative and dispregiative. So we just better avoid it anyhow. The Romani people is the largest ethnic minority in Europe. In slide 31, we can see some numerical data and the distribution of the Roma. According to Piasere, an Italian historian, there is the first Gypsy Europe with the 16% of the total Roma population, in which each country has 1 to 3% of Roma in it. Second Gypsy Europe, the 14.7%, less than 1% in each country. The third Gypsy Europe, only 0.1, 0.2% in each country, Russia, Great Britain, and Italy. Here, I want to anticipate that Italy is among the countries where Roma are more discriminated. They are felt like a strong menace, although they're so few, less than 0.2 of the whole population. Prejudices show people who accept them just another reality, something which is not true, but it looks like it was. They just believe it is. A menace, an invasion, 0.1 of the population. Many different groups and names, but only one people. Calais, Romanichels, Egyptians, Korakaneh, Sinti in Germany and northern Italy, travelers, gypsies, camminanti. But they are one people and they feel they are one people. In fact, that they call the non-Romani people Gage. And in the next slide, slide 33, we talk about religion, which is very interesting because it cannot be defined with institutionalized features. Although some groups are said to be Christians, some others, Muslims, their religions goes beyond these boundaries in a paradoxically very modern concept of common spirituality, pervasive spirituality. Romani religion also includes some archaic elements, especially in the relationship with death and funerals. The language has about 80 variations in the different local contexts it has interacted with. But it's still one language, and all Roma can understand one another. And that is now standardized, even in a written form, with an officially recognized alphabet shared by everybody. Slide 34. It was in 1971 that Roma had their first official World Romani Congress. It was in London with 23 participants from 10 countries. It adopted the term Roma for all the groups. This beautiful blue and green flag you can see here, the land and the sky, and 16 cartwheel, red cartwheel, which symbolize the itinerant tradition and the Indian roots. And then the national anthem, Jelem Jelem, which is about the Nazi extermination, Samudari Pen, Oporaimus. We can see here its text. I went, far and wide, I met happy Roma, but then the Black Legion murdered them. Anyhow, the people resists. Come with me, Roma of the world. The road have been opened again. Now is the time. Arise, Roma, arise. And here I put 3 links. A Spanish gypsy interpretation of Jelem Jelem, a Balkan one, and one from Santino Spinelli, who is a very good Italian musician. And this is his version. Slide 36, together with slide 37 and 38, it explains what anti-Zionism is. It's crucial to become aware of it because very few people are. Here I described anti-Zionism, which is very bad, especially in countries like Italy and Eastern Europe. This discrimination is even stronger than discrimination against immigrants. It includes a strong dehumanizing attitude. And above all, it is not perceived as such. There is no awareness of it. It is believed to be an objective view of the Romani people. It has devastating effects on self-confidence and self-esteem of Romani communities, especially young people. Young people, like all the people who live in ghettos, have zero positive expectations about their future, and this is tragic. The dehumanizing attitudes prevents any real interest in what Roma really are and stick their image to negative stereotypes. Anti-Zionism is not perceived as such, and injustice is not seen. And of course, the first crucial step is a correct information. Forms of anti-Zionism, here you can see different expressions. And I want to stress that in some countries, anti-Zionism is active at an institutional level. You can see the two last points. For instance, in Italy, it's quite frequent. Inadequate protection of victims, inaccess to justice, and discriminatory ethnic profiling in the context of law enforcement. That means that justice is not just towards Roma. It discriminates them. The Italian case, here you can see some most common stereotypes. The term gypsy is strongly dispregiative. And I like to talk for a moment of the kidnapping gypsy or kidnapper gypsy girl, a very common stereotype in Italy. There's a sort of liquid fear, as Bauman said, that gypsies kidnap Gage babies, but it's just the opposite. It is really an irrational fear because there are no trials ended with condemnations of Romani girls for having kidnapped a Gage baby. On the contrary, social operators, instead of helping poor Romani family, often take away from them their children, much more than they do with other families. Italy has also a very negative characteristic. Institution believed that Roma are nomad when they came from the Balkans in the 90s for the terrible ethnic war. So they put them in segregated ethnic Roma camps. In the past, they were called nomad camps. These are terrible ghettos which perpetrates marginalization and produce microcriminality. And young people here, as I've already said, have inside of them no positive expectations for their lives. 39, slide 39, a history of persecutions. Their roots were in India, then they passed through Egypt, Egyptian, Gypsy, and then they came to Europe. They were seen as mysterious, magic, obscure, consorted with the devil. They were not white. They were nomadic, but they were nomadic because they were persecuted and they had to flee. But all this caused persecution and stigma. From the beginning, anti-Gypsy legislations, they were even slaves. They were victims of oppressions, punishment, torture, even for entertainment, violence, public cruel executions, and gypsies' hunts, a sort of programs. There was a violent repression of their culture and forced assimilation, even sterilization. But all this did not annihilate the Roman people because its nonviolent resistance has kept their identity alive till today. We can say that they are a very interesting case of transnational people, a really European people in one sense. They do know no borders. and they are very proud because they have never engaged national wars. But in Italy, many Sintos and some Rom were partisans against Nazi fascism. Today, some avant-garde political views criticize the concept of national states itself, and the Romani people could teach us some very interesting things about this. But of course, this characteristic reinforced stereotypes. They are non citizens, they are foreigners everywhere, and so they're unworthy of enjoying the benefit of the state structure. According to Piaget, the modern state somehow is also born out of anti-Gypsyism, because Roma helped it to define the structure of a state just because they didn't recognize it. And here the forgotten memory, the Nazi genocide, Poraimus, great devouring, and Samudaripen, massacre, the term preferred by Roma. 500,000 killed by the Nazi in many atrocious ways, especially under terrible so-called experiments. They were persecuted at first because they were seen as naturally asocial and wanderers with criminal attitudes. But then the persecution became clearly a racial persecution, the gypsy race. In the lagers, they were confined in special areas, Zigeuner lager, with all the families together, because Nazi considered them like beasts to study. In Auschwitz, 23,000 Rom Sinti were detained and only 4 survived. And their names are known because a Polish prisoner entered their list. There was a rebellion in the Zigeuner Lager in Auschwitz on May 16, 1944. Even women tried to defend themselves from the Nazi who had come to take them to death. But the same year, on August the 2nd, in one night, they were all exterminated, almost 3,000 people. And this is the Roma's Holocaust Memorial Day, August the 2nd. In slide 42 and 43, we see how we can contrast anti-Ziganism. Here are some suggestions from the European Union. Equality, inclusion, participation, involvement of Roma communities. But of course, in national governments do not really accept these lines, discrimination cannot end. Italy is a particular case because it has its own very good strategy for inclusion of the Romani people, but it doesn't respect it. And so it has been condemned many times for disregarding European lines for Roman inclusion and for violating their rights. What we can do are current information, education, and leaving a prejudicial vision as teachers and as educators, because no program can be successful if its actors do not intimately believe in it. For instance, the full formal inclusion is guaranteed in schools in Italy. Romani children and students are together with the others. But most operators accept bad results as normal because of their prejudicial negative projection upon Roma children. And make that makes things very difficult. Self-esteem should be encouraged, and at a general level, governments should try to apply the European lines for inclusion. Successful stories of inclusion and integration must be widespread, and meetings with Romani communities, as well as recreational events altogether, are of course a good instrument of inclusion. Roma young people should be linked to community projects, not left in the ghettos alone. Romani music is, of course, very famous. And here we can see a quotation from something which has been written by Santino Spinelli, a very good Italian Rom musician, activist, and academical researcher. He teaches at the University of Pescara on the eastern coast of Italy. In Roma's oral culture, music has been a means of cultural preservation and transmission for centuries, a social and family unit agent, and even a means of psychological relaxation and liberation. At Roma celebrations, music reigns supreme, and its purpose is to unite, to pass on cultures and stories and communicate. A dualism characterizes it, like it characterizes the Romani soul in general, a profound melancholy because life is hard for them, but also joy, lively, captivating, vibrant rhythm because they really love life. The Romani music gave relevant contribution to many music styles, classical music, folk traditions in Balkans and in Scotia, flamenco in Spain, and even jazz, which Romans naturally love because of improvisation. And here, Romani traditional cultural heritage, even economic activities and artisan activities have a distinguished artistic connotation. Music, dancing, juggling, circus art, horse training, all has an artistic printing in Romani culture. Most women now dress in modern styles, but still love traditional, varicolored and embroidered clothes. And some young stylists have created a new style which merge modern and tradition, like Sara Cetti in Italy. Here you can see her picture. The Romani kitchen is influenced by the Balkan kitchen because Roma love cooking. Their dishes are very attractive. And if you want to organize, if you can organize a recreational event, a dinner all together with them cooking and with their music, it will be surely very successful. Here you have the bibliography for the whole unit. So poverty, minorities, and Romans. Kuma, I Was an Elephant Salesman, was the first Afro-Italian novel. Today, this literature is very widespread and very interesting. Ijaba Shego is a feminist, activist, anti-racist activist, and a very good writer. My Home is Where I Am, English edition. So thank you, and we'll see again.